Well, good morning, everybody. This is Mima. On the last program, I talked to you about the account of my carefree childhood and now for my teenage years. And believe it or not, I was a teenager at one time in my life. Had the same feelings and emotions that all of us go through. So when I was 10 years old, I gave my life to the Lord, and I was baptized at Simmons Mill Pond, which was also our swimming hole. I understood very little about what was happening, but I had heard the preacher, and I knew that I didn't want to go to hell, and I knew that Jesus was the only way that I could be saved and go to heaven. And so that when they gave the invitation, I went forward and, quote, joined the church. And I've heard a lot of people talk about, well, you didn't really accept the Lord, you joined the church. Well, that's just what we called it back then. It's the same thing you should do today when you give your life to the Lord. But I marched up front at the invitation because I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And I didn't realize that I had taken my first step in my journey with the Lord. And didn't know that now that I had accepted Jesus, that the devil was going to become my number one enemy. Just as he is with everybody that becomes a Christian. As our bodies are growing and our hormones are raging, we become aware of other people. And there was social injustice and prejudice even in my day and among the white people. It didn't just happen between black and whites. It happened between every race because there's always social injustice and prejudice. There was ridicule because of jealousy. There was the town folks versus the country folks. There was the store-bought dresses versus our chicken feed sack dresses. And teachers showing partiality because some of them in there were the banker's daughters or the druggist's daughters or bank store owners, whatever. And they seemed to favor those kids in addition to some of the rest of us. So the devil uses these kind of things to give us an inferiority complex and to establish a foothold in our lives. And most of us either have a very inferiority complex or very superiority complex, and neither one is from God. And I was no exception. There were a couple of things that happened to me in my childhood that caused me to feel guilt and shame, even though I was not to blame. I don't believe there was ever a time in my life that anybody could call me slender. I was not a twig by any stretch of the imagination. So I wasn't popular with the boys whenever I was in school, and I always thought it might be because I was overweight. But looking back, I realize now it was because of what my mom and my dad were old-fashioned when I was born, and they taught me old-fashioned morals and principles, and I realize now that that's probably what protected me from doing some of the things that I saw other boys and girls doing at my age. But being not popular only added to my poor self-image. Looking back, I can see that God was giving me his favor and his protection even whenever I was a teenager. I was not the best in the class. I wasn't the top, but I was in the top 5 or 6, so I felt all right. And even back in those days, he gave me the gift of leadership because I was the editor of our newspaper, and I was also the president of FHA, and those kind of things gave me a sense of self-importance, but I didn't realize that this was a God-given gift that he had given me even back in those age. And one time I thought, well, I never even talked about the Lord, but I did. When I went back and I read the publications when I was the editor of the school newspaper, I did. I talked about the Lord, and I didn't even realize it until I'd gone back and looked. But my brother had played basketball in high school, and he didn't do well in school. So my daddy said that he was never going to allow another one of his kids to play basketball. So even though I liked to play, I knew Daddy wasn't ever going to let me play. But I loved it. And so one day the coach asked me, said, how would you like to play basketball for me? And I said, well, I'd love to. I said, but Daddy's not going to let me play. I said, he's already said he had a dozen kids who weren't going to never let another one play. He says, well, I talked to him. Said, why don't you go home and ask him? So I couldn't believe it. I just knew that my dad would say no. But anyway, I wanted to play, so I got home and Daddy was on the back side of the field. And I ran all the way to where he was and I asked him if I could play basketball. And he said, well, yes, if you'll keep up your grades. And I was so excited, I ran all the way back home. And God had changed my daddy's heart about me playing basketball. And playing basketball was an extreme boost to my poor self-image because I was a good guard. And it pleased me no end to be able to hold the forward down from making any points. And this was when we played two courts, and I was fast, so I would hang back, and the forward that was looking to receive the ball across the line, everybody would think she was safe. And when they started to throw the ball, I put on all my speed and I ran up and I'd grab the ball and I'd take it away from her. And it really did me a lot of good to play basketball and to feel my self-image. So, and I played starting in the 8th grade until I graduated, and then I played about 5 or 6 years after I was married. So I played ball for probably 11 or 12 years. But to just give you an idea of how rough I might have been, the first game I ever played, the coach put me in and I fouled out with 4 fouls in the first quarter. So that gives you some idea of how my basketball playing was. But I played every game. I never sat out a game. So it was great. I enjoyed the fun and the camaraderie and the opportunity to go places and see things. And so this fulfilled a lot of my social needs. But nobody explained to me how God works in our lives when we become His. You know, I mean, I was just going along doing my thing. But something did happen during these years that made a great impression on me. And it was probably when I was about 15. I went to Vacation Bible School, and we had to memorize Psalms 1 and 115. And I wanted to be like the tree planted by the waters that gives forth its fruit in its season. And I wanted to dwell in the tabernacle of the Lord. And I knew what I had to do to be able to do that. And even though I was unaware of God working in my life, my journey had begun. So I have a poem that it's by an anonymous author, but I thought it so matches with my life that I wish I would have wrote it, but if I had, I'd have probably been too proud. But I want to share it with you because it's so true. And I think even you might can identify with it, where you are in your walk with the Lord. It's called The Road of Life. At first, I saw God as my observer, my judge, keeping track of the things that I did wrong, so as to know whether I merited heaven or hell when I die. He was out there, sort of like a president. I recognized his picture when I saw it, but I really didn't know him. But later on, when I met Christ, it seemed as though life were rather like a bike ride, but it was a tandem bike, and I noticed that Christ was in the back, helping me to pedal. I don't know when it was that he suggested we change places, but life has not been the same since. When I was in control, I knew the way. It was rather boring, but it was predictable. It was the shortest distance between 2 points. When he took the lead, he knew delightful long cuts, up mountains and through rocky places at breakneck speeds. It was all I could do to hang on, and even though it looked like madness, he said, pedal. I was worried and anxious and asked, where are you taking me? He laughed and didn't answer, and I started to learn to trust. I forgot my boring life and entered into the adventure, and when I'd say, I'm scared, he'd lean back and touch my hand. He took me to people with gifts that I needed, gifts of healing, acceptance, and joy. They gave me gifts to take on my journey, my lords and mine, and we were off again. He'd say, give them away. They're just extra baggage. So we did. To the people that we met, and I found that in giving, I received. And still our burden was light. I did not trust him at first in control of my life. I thought he'd wreck it. But he knows bike secrets. He knows how to make it bend to take sharp corners. He knows how to jump to clear high rocks. He knows how to fly to short and scary passages. And I'm learning to shut up and pedal in the strangest places, and I'm beginning to enjoy my new view and the cool breeze on my face with my delightful constant companion, Jesus Christ. And when I'm sure I can't do any more, he just says, pedal. During next week's program, I'm going to share with you when I was out on my own and I was living without the protection of my mom and dad. So I invite you and all your friends to share my journey with the Lord on YouTube. Inspirations from Mima. Listen, like, comment, share, and subscribe.